supporting me.
Ian McKelvey.
Mr. Speaker, I don't often get the opportunity to get this far up the speaking list, but I certainly have never heard a more interesting speech than that one. And for that speech to come from a person who's been through more leadership contests than I've been in hot meals, is pretty extraordinary, I think. And so we have an expert in the matter speaking to us on that issue. So we would have to take a little bit of notice of him because he's only been beaten 3 times, Mr. Speaker. So he is well practiced. But it was an interesting speech. And of course, the statistics he was quoting about one of the candidates, they don't even poll that much, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, back onto the real issues of the day, and I want to take a very brief time to acknowledge the Prime Minister who's taken leave of this House, or is about to take leave of this House. And I think, Mr. Speaker, I came into Parliament in 2011, like many of us that have been in the real world, not really knowing what I was coming to. I came into a place where we had a leader, I think, who was extraordinary. And I'll say no more about him because I don't think he needs any more saying about him. I think it's been an extraordinary time for New Zealand under his leadership. I want to make another comment about leadership, which James Shaw led off with. I've noticed anyone who leads by being upfront and showing the way, they very seldom look behind them. And often those kind of leaders find a massive gap behind them. And we saw one in this House not that many years ago, who, when she left, there was a massive gap behind her. I think leadership's much more about enabling people around you to perform to their best and to front things in troubled times. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to get on to some real facts of the issue now. And I noted the last speaker, Paul Goldsmith, spent a bit of time talking about the welfare reforms of this government, and I too think that they are a pretty special achievement, and I think the Prime Minister certainly led that for us. I will say no more about those because, in fact, he covered a lot of that. Mr. Speaker, what I really want to talk about is the fact that in recent years this government has created an environment where our unemployment rate has dropped to 4 point. It's okay, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy with them talking like that because they're talking to themselves. Where our unemployment rate has dropped to 4.9%, we have, in the last quarter, 35,000 more jobs created in New Zealand. We clearly need this population to continue growing at the rate it is just to supply the job market with people. And the NZDEIR are now predicting some 400,000 more jobs in the years leading up to 2021. I think, in fact, that will prove to be conservative, Mr. Speaker. So we certainly need to increase our population at a great old rate. And we are doing that, fortunately, because from a producing or an agricultural perspective, the more people, or not necessarily the more people, but certainly it's to our advantage to have more people living in New Zealand. I think it's most important. The other thing I want to touch on is the tourism industry, and the Rangitikei electorate, the north part of my electorate, significantly benefits from the massive increase in the number of tourists coming to New Zealand and in the investment that we've been making in that sector, particularly around cycling, walking, climbing, the Wanganui River. In fact, the Wanganui River settlement came through Parliament this morning, and that will progress very quickly in my part of the electorate. The other settlement that came through Parliament this morning was in the lower part of my electorate, Mr. Speaker, and the Rangitikei, and I think that's pretty special for them as well. Mr. Speaker, very quickly on the dairy industry, which we've seen, I guess, extraordinary growth in the dairy industry in recent years. It's slowed down significantly, and that's enabled some of the environmental challenges that dairy industry growth was causing to be managed. Mr. Speaker, I think the dairy industry is in much better space now. It is much stronger than it was in the boom times of 4 or 5 years ago, and I think we're going to see a very good return to those dairy farmers in the next year or two. I think also we will see some of our major challenges around the environment overcome. Finally, Mr. Speaker, my electorate relies on the sheep. We are the biggest sheep electorate in New Zealand, and we've seen the sheep meat industry, I think, turn around to some extent. And interestingly, it's turned around on the back of two very significant investments of overseas foreign currency into our two biggest firms, Silver Fern Farms. That deal going through yesterday or the day before, and the other one where we have the Alliance Meat Company having a strong partnership with overseas companies which will enable those to grow too. So, Mr Speaker, I think we're in pretty good order, and I'll take my leave.
Speaker.